All right, so my name is Paul Harris, and I recently watched the Devil We Know documentary. Uh, this documentary really kind of hits home because my great grandfather actually worked for DuPont in Old Hickory, Tennessee, and there's no telling what uh, he came in contact with while he was working there. Honestly didn't know the man, but after watching this documentary, all that could have been passed on from generation to generation. Some of the questions that I answered as I watched this video, the first one is, what are the ethical implications or violations that occurred? And I noticed that pregnant women that worked with Teflon products, specifically C8, some of those women's babies were born with birth defects, and it seems to be that DuPont attempted to cover it up and hide it, and it looks as though they still are trying to cover it up. Another is that DuPont dumped chemical byproduct from this C8 into a stream that killed a farmer's entire livestock, and also eventually the farmer and his wife both died of complications. And DuPont dumped this C8 into the waterways, which this was after 3M warned them specifically not to do this. So, it was almost like a direct oversight of what 3M had suggested, and they dumped it anyway. And this dumping of chemicals into the waterways in the Ohio River Valley, it was linked to a lot of rise in different diseases such as various cancers and ulcerative colitis and a few other issues that people were having. One question that I was asked to think on as I watched the movie was that where does the company's responsibility end? And I personally believe that a company is responsible for everyone that is either sick or injured as a result of a direct exposure to that company's products. I believe that they're responsible to the public in general, because we all have Teflon products in our blood, our DuPont products, this C8 in our blood. And I believe that, I don't know how to exactly solve that problem, or what exactly they owe the world, but I would assume maybe different programs to environmental programs or things of that nature. I ultimately believe that companies need to take ownership of their mistakes and attempt to make things right in the best way. And in some cases, I believe that if it's just an absolute obvious cover-up, people in positions that make these decisions need to serve time in federal prison. If it was an obvious just lack of regard for human life, which it seems to be in some cases in this documentary. Then another question I was asked to look at was, what is the connection of this case to technical communication? And I look at it and the contrast in the way certain people use technical communication, like the 3M company used technical communication to attempt to tell DuPont not to use dump these products into waterways. They said specifically do not do this, do not dump this chemical into waterways. And 3M may still be responsible, but they tried to do the right thing and communicate to the consumer that some of these products were dangerous, and they pulled a lot of these products off of the market. And then DuPont comes around and looks at this as an opportunity for them to kind of have a monopoly on this market of people that produce C8, and instead of looking at it from a greater good perspective. Another thing where I saw a lack of technical communication was where the lawyer for DuPont used curse words multiple times to describe the lawsuit between the farmer that had an adjacent property to where they were dumping these chemicals. And he said things like, without me saying it, F him, and the blank is about to hit the fan. To me, that is a complete lack of technical communication, and honestly, it came across as extremely inhumane and extremely calloused, and just very unprofessional. So, I believe that using a more professional type of language when you're communicating things, even if it's to, and in this case, it was to his son and an old army buddy. At the end of the day, if that conversation is public record and you're in a position like that, you need to be professional, because at the end of the day, this man lost his livelihood and eventually his life. And I mean, he came across looking extremely bad in this particular situation. Another question the last question I was asked to address was, how does this documentary, how will this documentary impact your future approach to the workplace? And I look at it and I contrast the way DuPont handled this situation to the way my current employer handled a situation back in 2010. You have DuPont on one hand that covered up an extremely big controversy where they're dumping this chemical that they shouldn't have into the waterways. It's causing all kinds of illness. And instead of taking ownership and responsibility for this problem, they basically cover it up and just push it off, pay a fine, and just try to create this other company that creates this new form of this product, this new form of C8. I didn't write down what it's called. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but they're just constantly trying to shift blame. At one point, the lady that had the son with a birth defect, they told her that it was her fault. It must have been something she did. Constantly shifting the blame. I contrast this situation to Toyota, which is the company I currently work for. Back in 2010, they had a few cars that the accelerator pedal stuck to the floor and ended up killing and injuring a few people. And they went and testified in front of Congress and took ownership and said, it still was a bad thing, but they took ownership for this problem. They said, we're going to do our best to not let anything like this happen again. We as a company, each month, we all reflect on the people that lost their lives, and on every quality. We have a quality month where we take and we look at all these things. We listen to the the police, the 911 call, the people that lost their lives in that car crash. We all have to listen to that. We all have to reflect on that, no matter how high or low our job. We all have to have that in mind, because our mindset is we can't let this happen again. And I ultimately want to be a person who takes ownership of issues and problems and try to solve these problems and try to do the right thing at the end of the day, instead of a person that attempts to cover up things and to lie and push blame. Ultimately, I believe ownership and taking responsibility and doing the right thing should always be the very first thing on a company's mind, or on a person's mind. So that's what I got out of the documentary. Thank you.